Okay. David, can you see and hear me okay?
I can see you and hear you fine.
All right. Good. So 5. We are at quorum, but I want to wait just a half a minute more. Stand by 1.
Commissioner Hanson, we can see you.
Okay, great, thanks.
Welcome. We can hear you.
Okay, well, seeing a quorum, and I think everybody's had a good sound and video check, we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, members of the public. Thank you, staff, council, for joining us for the regular meeting of the County of San Diego's Independent Redistricting Commission. I'll begin by asking our clerk, David Hall, for information about today's meeting. David.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. At this time, I'd like to invite any members of the public who wish to provide oral testimony during today's meeting to please review the instructions posted on the redistricting website at www.sandiegocounty.gov/redistricting. We ask that individuals who wish to speak submit an online request to speak form in advance for planning purposes. All timely requests to speak from the public made at today's meeting will be honored. In addition, agendas, minutes, and supporting materials for the Commission's meetings are posted on the redistricting website, including instructions to request translation. Meeting agendas are translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, Chinese, Filipino, Arabic, Japanese, Korean, Laotian, as required by law. Thank you, Chair Boehm.
Thank you, David. The next item on the agenda is the roll call. So David, back to you. Could you please call the roll?
Thank you. Before I call the roll, I would like to note for the record that all commissioners are participating via teleconference, and as such, all votes will be handled by a roll call vote. As I call your name, I'll ask each of the commissioners to please unmute your microphone and say here or present. Chair Boehm.
Here.
Vice Chair Caterina.
Here.
Vice Chair Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Brown. You're muted.
I thought I was unmuted. Sorry. Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Diaz. Commissioner Dostal. Commissioner Hanson.
Here.
Commissioner Inman.
Here.
Commissioner Krugliak.
Here.
Commissioner Larson.
Here.
Commissioner Pons.
Here.
Commissioner Russ.
Here.
Commissioner Serbin. Thank you, Chair Boehm.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is non-agenda public communication speakers. This is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on subject matters within the commission's jurisdiction, but not an item on today's agenda. The only action the commission may take is a referral to staff. However, I'm going to beg the commission's indulgence for just a reminder on exactly what that means. I want to clarify that the IRC can't vote to approve any items that are raised by the public under this portion of the meeting today because it's not on the agenda that was circulated and noticed to the public. Commissioners can ask staff to follow up on any specific questions in addition to just a referral, and can request to add items for consideration at a future meeting when we get to our now regular future agenda items item towards the end of our meeting. Please know that the co-vice chairs, council, staff, and I put a top priority on any requests or comments or additional interpretations by commissioners when we put the agenda together, even as we try to find the right balance of items within the time frame for any particular meeting. At the same time, I know that staff has been following up administratively with issues that have been raised by the public at some of our past meetings, including speaking with the person from our last meeting who had a problem dialing in, and I think that's now been resolved. So just as a reminder, it's a very long way of saying, when we refer an item to staff, it doesn't mean we're putting it on a shelf and forgetting about it. It means that first, staff, council, the co-vice chairs, and I will look to those items and see which ones seem to be ripe in one way or another for additional discussion at the next meeting. And if not, keep looking for the right opportunity to bring them in. But it also means that if commissioners express interest or have a particular action they want considered with regard to one of those items raised by the public, we will do everything possible to see that addressed in a timely and effective manner with due respect for other agenda items and other work of the commission. So with all that, David, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on non-agenda item matters today?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. We do have 5 members of the public who have requested to speak in advance of today's meeting. I would also ask that any member of the public who wishes to address the commission on items that do not appear on today's agenda, please raise a virtual hand at this time by clicking the raise hand button on Zoom, or by pressing *9 if you are dialing in. We will first hear from those who have requested to speak in advance in the order that we have received the request. We'll begin with Joshua Piedra. Mr. Piedra, Joshua, you will have 2 minutes to address the board.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Joshua Piedra, and I'm the political organizer of SIU 221. And I'm following up with the public comments we made at the last meeting, asking you all to uphold the Voting Rights Act. I want to start off by first clarifying some misconceptions brought up at the last meeting, being that not adhering to the Voting Rights Act does not mean that people lose their right to vote. However, doing so does create a situation where the power of one's voice in our democracy can be intentionally lessened by the diluting of their vote through racist gerrymandering, meaning that either through splitting or packing communities of color through redistricting can have intentional effects on those communities. And this has been done countless of times throughout the history of our country, with the most recent example being the drawing of the congressional mapping in North Carolina. And the Voting Rights Act came out of a necessity to protect the values of our democracy. That is to ensure everyone has a fair and equal voice in it. And that's why I'm here today to urge that this commission include in a future agenda our proposal to add an amendment to the RFP process to require firms bidding to draw the county lines to disclose whether any of the previously drawn maps were challenged or even overturned for violating the Voting Rights Act. We must also have a public interview process of these consultants to ensure that transparency and protecting the voices of communities of color are being valued. And I would love to see the commission have a discussion on this important issue and address our community concerns. Thank you.
Now call forward Candy Custodio Tan. You'll have 2 minutes to address the commission. Please begin by stating your name for the audio record. And I believe you are muted, so you may need to dial *6 to unmute.
Hello, thank you. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Candy and I'm the Executive Director of Asian Solidarity Collective. I was here last meeting and made a public comment asking you all to uphold the Voting Rights Act and to ensure that the process of selecting a demographer also upholds this requirement as well. So I'm wanting to know how you're going to respond to the community's concerns on this issue. I urge you to set the highest of standards throughout this redistricting process, upholding the Voting Rights Act as the VRA empowers historically disenfranchised communities. It protects our voting rights for everybody and it empowers us. We should not hire firms who have enabled political gendermandering and colluded with politicians to entrench power at the public's expense. So we need a transparent process, establishing an ad hoc committee and to ensure that it's in compliance with the Voting Rights Act. Thank you very much.
Jean Hui Tran, you have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jean Hui. I'm an organizer with the CBI Center on Policy Initiative. Last meeting, I made a public comment asking you all to uphold the Voting Rights Act and ensure that the process of selecting a demographer that would also uphold the requirement as well. I am following up on that comment, and aptitude will respond to the community concern on the issues by including that into the future agenda. So the importance of the Voting Rights Act for us, for our community, is protecting, protecting and empower historically disenfranchised community. We should not hire a firm with a pattern of drawing map that violating the Voting Rights Act. So what we asking for this commission is to consider to establish an ad hoc committee, the same as the California IRC has done, to ensure that every step of this redistricting process is in compliance with the Voting Rights Act, and holding the interview of potential demographic consultant in public to ensure transparency, and add an amendment to the RFP process to require the prospective consultant to disclose if they previously drawn map were challenged or overturned for violating the Voting Rights Act. I would love to see this commission to have a discussion on this important issue and address our concern that our voices simply did not just go unheard. Thank you.
Shay Miller, you have 2 minutes to address the commission.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Shay Miller, and I'm calling with a CPI. Again, I'm calling in from the last meeting, and I just want to make a public comment and asking you all to uphold the Voter Rights Act and to ensure that the process of the selecting a demographer also upholds this requirement as well. And I'm following up on the comments that I asked with you. Will respond to the community's concern on this issue. The VAR stops cracking and impacting voters of color to limit the political power, and we should not hire firms that have the pattern of drawing maps that violate the VRA. We should not hire firms whose maps have faced considered legal challenges for limiting representation for the communities of color. What we should do is we should establish an ad hoc community to ensure every step of the redistricting process is in compliance with the Voter Rights Act. And by holding the interview of potential demographic consultants in the public will ensure transparency. Please add an amendment to the RFP process to require the prospect consultants to disclose their previous draw maps if they were challenged or if they overturned or if they violated the VRA Act. I would love to see the commission to have a discussion on this important issue, address our concerns, and that our voices simply don't just go unheard. Thank you for your time.
Yasmin Obeid, you have 2 minutes to address the commission.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yasmin Abed, and I am the Advocacy Coordinator with Majdal, the Arab Community Center of San Diego. Last meeting, a lot of my colleagues here on the call made a public comment asking you all to uphold the Voting Rights Act and ensure that the process of selecting a demographer also upholds this requirement. We're just following up and asking that you all respond to the community's concern on this issue, as well as include it in your future agenda. We also really want to lift up that the VRA empowers historically disenfranchised communities. That's why it's really important. And things we shouldn't be doing is really hiring firms who have enabled political gerrymandering, included with politicians to entrench power at the public's expense. Things we should be doing is holding the interview of potential demographic consultants in public to ensure transparency and the community's presence and participation. That's really critical. I would love to see the commission to have a discussion on this important issue and address our concerns that our voices simply did not just go unheard. I think lastly, I would want to end with saying that a lot of our communities, for example, the Arab community that Majdal represents, are usually not shown and they're erased in the census. So we want to make sure that they're not erased in the redistricting process, because we're not white communities. We're not all white communities, and it's unfortunate that we are always listed as white. So we're here to ensure that our community's voices are not erased, and that you're listening to them. Thank you so much and have a great day.
If there are any other members of the public who wish to address the commission on non-agenda public comment, please raise your virtual hand at this time. I would also like to note for the record that the commission's log of ex parte communications received has been updated on the website. Not seeing any further requests to speak, that concludes non-agenda public comment. Chair Bain.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you to members of the public for your continued voice that we are listening to. The next item on the agenda, though, for today are the approval of the minutes from the May 13th, 2021 regular meeting. David, are there any requests from the public to speak on this item?
We do not have any members of the public who have requested to address the commission in advance on this item. But if anybody would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time by pressing the raise hand button on Zoom, or by pressing *9 if you're dialing in by phone. Not seeing any requests to speak, this concludes public comment on this item, Chair Bain.
Thank you very much, David. Let me just ask commissioners, are there any clarifying questions or comments on this item? Seeing none. As this is an action item that requires a motion before any discussion and actual vote, let me ask if there's a motion to approve the minutes from the May 13th meeting.
So moved.
Commissioner Diaz, so moved. Second.
Second.
Commissioner Chen, thank you very much. Any discussion, commissioners? Very good. So David, please call the roll.
Thank you, Chair Bain. Commissioner Serbin, if he has joined us. Chair Bain.
Aye.
Commissioner Dostal. Commissioner Krugliak.
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Russ.
Aye.
Commissioner Katarina.
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia.
Aye.
Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner Inman.
Aye.
Commissioner Pons.
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson.
Aye.
That motion passes with all commissioners present voting aye.
Very good. Thank you, David. Thank you, commissioners. We'll now move on to item 5 on the agenda, additional training. Today we have a presentation from one of the region's community partners to discuss, among other things, best practices for community engagement. I know we all look forward to hearing this presentation and the additional food for thought it will provide as our IRC continues to move forward, working with our public outreach and engagement contractor once they're onboarded to gather input from various communities of interest that will be so important to the IRC's map drawing. I'm pleased to welcome today's guest speaker and look forward to an insightful presentation. By way of introduction, Janine Ericat is a community organizer at the Partnership for the Advancement of New Americans, or PANA. She's responsible there for leading PANA's community listening sessions, advocacy campaigns, and on-the-ground organizing on policy issues that affect refugee and immigrant communities. The daughter of Palestinian immigrants, Janine strives to uplift the refugee and immigrant community in San Diego through advocacy. She holds a BS in Public Health Sciences and BA in History from the University of California at Irvine, and has worked with the UCSD Women's Center. In her free time, she is a dedicated volunteer with the Majdal Community Center in El Cajon, a grassroots, locally driven institution committed to uplifting the Arab community in San Diego through political engagement, advocacy, and cultural programming, as well as with the Heart organization, which works to ensure Muslims have the resources, language, and choice to nurture sexual health and confront sexual violence. As standard for these kind of presentations, we will first hear any public comments after the presentation, and then commissioners will have a chance to ask questions and offer comments. Again, this is an informational item with no action for the commission at today's meeting. I'll now turn it over to our presenter that we're delighted to have here today again, Ms. Janine Ericat. Please go ahead.
Thank you all so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to be here. I know that I've called in a lot at the beginning, and so it's great to be able for you all to see me and for us to have a two-way conversation at the end of this session. I'm coming today to speak on best practices, but I just wanted to preface by saying that you all have done such an amazing job and have been really responsive to the community and the public when we call in, and have really been an example for the state in leading this work. So I want to thank you, and then we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so our mission at PANA is to next slide. So before I get into our best practices, I'm going to go over PANA really quick. Can we go to the second slide about the mission? Thank you. So our mission at PANA is we fight to advance the full economic, social, and civic inclusion of refugees in the San Diego region, throughout California and across the country. Next slide, please. Our vision is that we envision a world where refugees are connected global leaders, building a transcontinental movement to advance meaningful freedom for all. Next slide, please. I know we're all familiar with San Diego, but just wanted to highlight that San Diego, since 1975, we've had 86,000 refugees resettle in San Diego and have been one of the leaders in the state, if not the nation, in accepting refugees. Next slide, please. And in addition, San Diego is home to significant population from the Middle East, South Asia, and the African diaspora. And I don't mind waiting while you go into full screen, by the way, if that's easier for your end. For whoever's sharing the screen.
Lizette or team, are you going into the slideshow view?
Yes, Barbara, I'm pushing F5 and
it's not working.
Screen, but
I can also share my screen if that's easier.
Okay.
Can you see it now?
Now we have the minutes up. So let's go back. Yeah, I think we're going to have to do it this way. Thank you.
Okay. No problem. So at PANA, we serve the Black and African, Arab, Middle Eastern, Muslim, South Asian communities throughout San Diego County. Our community members come from various countries across the Middle East, the continent of Africa, and South Asia, including, but not limited to, Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Somalia, Ethiopia, Eritrea, Democratic Republic of Congo, Sudan, South Sudan, Afghanistan, and Burma or Myanmar. And these communities are incredibly diverse, coming from different countries of origins, multiple religions, multiple languages spoken even within ethnic groups. We serve over 30 languages, but our most common languages that the community members we serve speak are Arabic, Dari Pashto, Oromo, Somali, and Swahili. Next slide, please. So PANA was part of the County 2020 initiative. Like many organizations in the county, we worked really hard to get our community counted in the census. But as some of you may know, although we're accurately represented in the head count, our community isn't accurately represented in the race and ethnicity category because the census doesn't provide a way for BMEMSIC communities to be truly counted. And the Sunset format functionally whitewashes these communities. For Arab and Middle Eastern people, North Africans, the only option is to select the white box. And for many African immigrant and diasporic communities, likewise, may not see an ethnic category that captures their identity. And unfortunately, the American Community Survey does not capture the languages spoken by MEMSA communities. All this to say, that's why the COI criteria is so critical for BMEMSA communities, and it's how our communities show up in redistricting and why so many of us are so excited to be part of the process and why I'm here today. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go into best practices for community engagement. If you could go to the next slide, please. Our first recommendation is that you partner with local community ethnic-based organizations on redistricting efforts. Because this is the first time many community members and folks in San Diego County will engage with redistricting, it requires the trusted messengers not only to educate the community, but be experienced in organizing to get the community involved in the process. If you see this picture on the slide, this is actually from PANA's one of our first community of interest community mapping sessions. We had over 49 community members from the Somali community who are not all pictured, but come out and discuss what a COI is and what their community would look like and, you know, where they live. And so we say that to say that, you know, when you have materials and information ready, community partners like PANA and like others in the county can help you outreach to the community, and they're the most effective way to engage historically represented communities. Because ideally, you want to get input from the community on where the best places are to have meetings or to have these sessions. I know you all have an exciting educational tour coming up, and different regions may have different trusted messengers. So in City Heights, PANA is one of those trusted messengers. We can give you information on language access, interpretation, location, etc. And maybe North County is different, and different parts of East County. Next slide, please. So the next couple slides are going to cover language access. Before I get into that, again, I want to give you all credit because San Diego County's commission is leading the state on language access. You are translating the agenda in the 8 languages well before even the state was, offering interpretation beyond the 8. So really want to thank you all and thank the staff who've put in the work to be leading the state on this and making sure that everyone has an opportunity to engage in this process. Because when there isn't language access, you're really telling people that their input and their participation doesn't matter. So just to continue this strong start, we have a couple of recommendations. One being to consider translating key documents such as timeline and hearing dates so community members know when to show up, and to possibly provide a glossary for interpreters since this language is very technical, considering redistricting comes only every 10 years. Even for those of us in English, some of these words are new concepts. And you don't have to do this alone, but it could be shared with the State Commission on creating a resource bank, or even the City of San Diego or other jurisdictions around the state. Lastly, we know that you are still working on deciding what tool you'll be using, if it's the state tools or Districtor or, you know, Dave's tool. We know there's a lot of tools out there. Whichever tool that you decide to use, or if you decide to create a tool, we ask that you consider translating the mapping tools into the 8 languages again to really facilitate participation for communities. We know we worked really hard at the state level to get the Draw My California tool translated into the state's top 12 languages. So it'd be great to see that replicated for our county. Next slide, please. The next slide, we really want to talk about language access specific to meetings. So want to ask that, although it's great that you are already doing this in 8 languages, want to ask whether the 8 languages that the agendas are being provided for and interpretations being provided for really encompass everyone you're engaging. So like I mentioned, this Sunday, we had 49 community members show up and the session was held in the Somali language. We know that a lot of the Somali communities involved, and we ask that you add the Somali language to your top 8 languages. And I'm sure the Somali community isn't the only community that isn't represented currently in the languages offered. Again, to really work with community partners who can identify region-specific languages needed to promote engagement within specific areas. We recommend that you translate both written and verbal public comments so the public knows, and maybe this is something you're already doing, you know, maybe this is more of a question that can be addressed, but so it's a two-way conversation between both the public and the commission when we're attending these meetings, and which leads into the second point or the fourth point, translate the entire meeting when interpretation is requested, not just the public comment period. So it's not only you hearing what the person has to say, but so the individual calling in knows what decisions are being made and what's being decided on and what's happening, so they can fully participate. And lastly, just want to ask that you consider doubling the public comment time for interpretation. So for example, if in English we have 3 minutes to speak, the person requesting interpretation will have 6 minutes to speak because we know it takes time for live interpretation. Next slide, please. Next, we want to ask that you develop a process flow to make sure that language access requests and non-English public comment and assistant requests are transmitted to the line drawer and IRC. Really, this is just so everyone knows what if they request interpretation or if they're submitting a public comment in their own language, what the process is, where's it going, who is it getting to? Is it getting to the line jar? Is it getting to the IRC? And so forth. And this can just be really helpful to have at the beginning, because we know sometimes translation issues can slip through the cracks, and mapping out this process early on can help prevent this from happening. Next slide, please. Again, you all have been doing such a great job. And so we just want to encourage that when the public input hearings begin, to continue the practice of different meeting times, and even consider having meetings on the weekend, so people who are working can also come in, and vice versa. And want to ask that even if the meetings are virtual, to hold region-specific hearings. So even although it's virtual and anyone can access it from across the county, as opposed to if we were doing it in person. I know Nicole told me this is still being figured out, but if it is staying virtual, to still have it by region. Because it's important to focus on one area and that you get to know the area. I know as San Diegans, we believe that we know all of San Diego, but every part of it is really unique. And when you're able to do a region-specific area, you can get people from that community who can really, illustrate a picture on what the community is beyond just the physical boundaries. And also help when you start drawing the lines to keep in mind of the stories and the people that you heard from the area. Next, I want to ask that you consider allowing group presentations. And this was maybe more of a question, maybe, but maybe, we have 49 people excited to come out and present, who came together to decide their COI. We also had a session with our youth. We had 25 youth engaged and really excited to present to you about where their community is and who is in their community. So the question is from us and other partners who are working on educating their community and hosting community workshops and training people on how to testify is, would you rather have 50 people come in support of a COI session because they're going to be presenting on the same COI, or would you rather have a group presentation with maybe 5 people from that community and have longer time to present and have really a deeper presentation? So it's not 50 people calling in, but it's 5 people and really going into the level of detail to inform their COI. Next, we want to ask that you consider having an appointment system for when the public hearings happen. Especially during this phase, lots of people have opinions and want to be involved, but people also have work and kids and life, I'm sure, as all of you do. And so it can be difficult to wait around either on the phone, or if we go in person, physically in person, for hours waiting to speak, for 3 minutes. So just wanted to propose this idea of possibly having a sign-up time where people can sign up to give a testimony at a certain time. And even grouping them by language, so it's easier on the interpreter and easier on staff, and not having to go between callers if we're doing it over the phone. And even if people don't fill up for all the sessions, to leave the language window open for anyone who may choose to drop in. And when we say consider an appointment system, this isn't to say that people can't just call in if they choose to, but to give it as an option for people who wouldn't be able to otherwise wait. And then the other suggestion is, if the hearings are virtual, to have a video option for speakers who are calling in and giving their testimony, like I am today. I know For me as a member of the public calling in for months, you only hearing my voice can make it's a different type of engagement than if we were in person and you saw me and I saw you. So just want to ask that you consider that as an option for speakers, especially when they start talking about their neighborhoods and who they are. And I'm sure you'll have so many people calling in because you have this exciting educational tour coming up, and you're going to get a lot of engagement. So for both ways. And, again, just to set the timeline for hearings in advance so the public can plan ahead and make sure that they're part of this process. And lastly, on this slide about accessibility is to check that the state and city hearing schedules don't conflict with the county's public input hearings. I know the state just released their schedule. San Diego is starting in July. I don't know if the city of San Diego has, but since you have overlapping residents, it would be good if they're not at the same time so people can participate on all three levels. Next slide, please. This is our last slide. It's about public input hearings and timeline. So I know you all are doing a great job and have asked for additional time for this mapping phase. And I know at PANA, we're fully in support of this because we believe it increases community engagement and participation. And also just want to say to please let the public know how we can support you in advocating for this longer timeline. I know others feel the same way and are worried about the mapping deadlines being during the holidays for many people. But all that to say that, we ask that you utilize the time before the receipt of state adjusted census data to gather COI input. This is really an opportunity to hear a lot of the rich histories of communities throughout San Diego County. Also ask that you schedule sufficient time in hearings between the receipt of state adjusted data and drawing of your first maps to allow community the time to do VRA analysis and draft map presentations, because some of them may really be interested in that or have even that expertise. And lastly, to ensure sufficient time and hearings for comment on draft maps, the public needs time to review and educate and possibly translate these maps and engage communities. And they may offer important feedback on proposed map adjustments if their community was split in half, or if a line was drawn, they're part of a community that they don't really identify with. So just want to ask that you really ensure that you're giving enough time for the public to be part of the mapping phase, but even before the mapping phase starts. And you all have done such an amazing job leading on that already. And I know that was a lot of information, but I was trying to keep it concise, given you have a long meeting ahead of you. So I want really to thank you all for having me here today, and PANA and myself are happy to be a resource for you throughout this whole process, and I'm sure others in the county likewise are as well. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Well, Janine, thank you very much. I'll express gratitude even more in just a moment, but I want to move on first to invite public comment, and then we'll have Commissioner questions and comments, and I already see hands going up, so this will be a good dialogue we have. Before we do anything else, though, let me ask David, are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. We did not have any members of the public who requested to address the commission in advance on this item, but if anybody would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time by clicking the raise hand button on Zoom or by pressing *9 if you're dialing in by phone. Not seeing any requests to speak, this concludes public comment on this item. Chair Boehm.
Very good. In keeping with our usual procedure, then, I'll open the floor for questions and comments. Ms. Ericott, as well as staff and council, please feel free to respond. I'll try to moderate things. We'll try to give this at least a few minutes because there's such great content to talk about. The current list I have is Commissioner Krugliak, then Commissioner Russ, then Commissioner Inman. For those who don't use their hands, does anyone else want to be added to the list at this moment? The electronic hands, I should say. Very good. So we'll start with Commissioner Krugliak.
Ms. Ericat, thank you. I always appreciated your public comments, and so I'm very glad that you're able to come and give us such a wonderful presentation. I apologize if this sounds like a very basic question, but at the end of the day, we're drawing a map. The information that we need from communities of interest are map boundaries, like where they live, what is important to them, what they define as their community. Given that you work with so many communities and other groups work with so many different communities, what is the benefit of having all of these communities come and talk to us as opposed to giving us the maps that we can then use to make sure that that community and all the communities are appropriately counted and reflected in the final county map?
Thank you so much, Commissioner Kubliak, for that great question. So actually something that we've been doing, and it's something that we're seeing at the state level, is that when people come to present on their community of interest and to talk about their community, they have a map that they've already drawn out using the state COI tool known as Draw My California Community. So even in our community session, while we were having people talk about their maps, we were drawing it digitally on it. We did a physical map and we worked with them to do it digitally. And I don't know what this commission has planned for it, but to my understanding, the way that I saw last week at the state commission meeting is when they get community interest testimony, they're hoping to pull up the map submission that the community member or the individual has already submitted to the commission on what the map is talking about. So they have geographic boundaries. I think also likewise myself, and I'm sure other community organizations in the county are also working on, when working with community members, to really help them explain that, you know, when you're saying your testimony, to use like the street names to say I'm from the west of the 94 East to the 15 South, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's also something that I think if the commission provided materials on and explaining what you're looking for, I think that would be so helpful that, you know, when you're looking for these community interest testimonies, that you want people to have geographic boundaries. So all that to say that I hope the commission and the county staff are really looking into using this model of having people submit while having their map on the screen, or if there's another system, because you're right. At the end of the day, this is about drawing mapping lines, and we're grounded in the lines. And so we're hoping that the verbal testimony is just adding color to a map that an individual can submit.
Okay, I understand. I think there are some constraints around looking at lines prior to certain points in the process. But in general, I would just hope that there's no constraint on the groups sending us their maps, sending us all the maps, even if they're like paper maps or anything else, like send them to us, even if they're not speaking. I don't want that to be a constraint for actually getting the maps.
Yeah, of course. And I really appreciate you bringing that up. And I actually think it would be great if the commission could maybe release a document saying that that's what you want and you all are accepting submissions. I would even go so far to say that to let the public know if you're accepting submissions in their own language, in a non-English language that can then be translated by staff, so that they know that they don't have to come and speak at the meeting, and that their voice and their map will still be accepted.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thank you both for that dialogue. I have Commissioners Russ, Inman, and then Serban. So Commissioner Russ, please.
Thank you, Janine, for that presentation. I have a very simple question. I was wondering, what is the size of your constituency, of PANA's constituency? You said that there were 86,000 refugees or immigrants since 1975. What is the size today? Have you an estimate on that?
Yeah, so actually that's a great question, Commissioner Russ. As I mentioned, it's hard to quantify our numbers specifically because a lot of our community members don't show up in the census data, and it's difficult to extrapolate that. But our estimates is at least 200,000 across the county, if not more. It means we know some of our community members show up in other categories, but often we don't show up as easily in the data. And that's why the community of interest testimony is so important to many of our community members, because now they know that they can finally show up and they're not going to be hidden but at the forefront of it. So thank you for that question.
Thank you.
Commissioner Inman.
Yes, thank you. A very, very good presentation. I really enjoyed listening to it, and you definitely raised some very important issues that we need to consider. Now, one of the things kind of follows up on Commissioner Russ's comment. One of the things that we do need to understand is within a community of interest, what's the density, if you will, within the geography. And so that would be if you can have any way of including that when submitting communities of interest, if any number helps. And so any way that you can quantify the density, just the proportion of the population that fits in with the community of interest you're defining is definitely going to help us. And the other comment from your presentation that I want to emphasize again is the relationship between communities of interest in the Voting Rights Act. Census data is extremely useful for certain things, but as you stated, there are a lot of communities that aren't captured. And the only way that we can be made aware of those is if the public tells us and we get sufficient input. So I really appreciated your presentation and bringing those points out. A question I had was with the state tool, you referenced it and it sounds like you're using it. Is that adequate for defining communities of interest in your mind, or are there potentially better ways to do it besides that state tool?
Yeah, I know that state tool was worked on for several months with some of the people like Karen McDonald worked on it, Jamie, other people. It's a great tool, and the intention of that tool is that it's a community of interest specific tool. It's called Draw My California Community, or CA Community to be specific. What's really great about that tool is it gives people the option to, when they're describing their map, to say all the things that you all have like identified, like where do you live? What are the streets, to have like written testimony about how would you name your community? Who are you in community with? What brings your community together as they draw their tool? I know it doesn't show any political current boundaries, or it only even shows county boundaries, to exactly what Commissioner Kubliak said for that conflict of seeing lines right now. So I think it's a great tool. It's very user friendly. It's already translated in 12 languages. But I know other jurisdictions are considering district or district R. So I think there are other tools out there as well. I'm just most familiar with Draw My California tool, and I think it's really easy for anyone to use, even if they were using it on their own.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you bringing up the number about quantifying and census. I know that's one of the reasons why redistricting is so important to our communities, is so that we can continue to advocate to have our own category in the census. It was something, it's been a fight for over 10 years, but maybe if we're unified in our district boundaries, it's something we can continue to uplift for the reasons both you and Commissioner Russ brought up.
Yes, thank you.
Again, thanks to all three of you for all that. Commissioner Hanson, I saw your hand. Commissioner Serban, did you still have a question? No. Okay, so Commissioner Hanson. Commissioner, you're on mute, I think.
Hi. Thanks so much for all your work in the refugee community. For a time, I worked as a grant writer and a contract manager for one of the resettlement agencies. And I know that they are kind of a small, only 4 agencies, tight-knit group of people that are really, in a sense, responsible for having formed these communities of interest, because they're the ones that chose the housing that the people went to originally. And so that's kind of a core group. That, do you work with them now? I'm retired now, so I don't work in the community, but do you work with those agencies now?
So we're not, PANA's really unique, and we're not necessarily a direct service-based agency like many of the other organizations. We help community members apply for applications for like the affordable housing, for EDD, for benefits, but we're not necessarily involved in the choosing the locations in that way. We are a newer organization. We started about 6 years ago.
Well, these agencies are the ones that work with the Office of Refugee Resettlement at the federal level. They're the ones that get assigned the refugees in the first place, and they're the ones that greet them at the airport and support them for at least 6 months after they're here. So those agencies, and I say, like I say, there are only 4 of them, know about every refugee family from at the beginning. That's not to say they know all about them at 10, 12, 15 years later. They certainly could give us a lot of insight into at least where they originally settled and how those communities were formed.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely in contact with them, but I would encourage you all to also reach out to them. And I'm sure there's so many organizations across the county who similarly have a very location specific community that they serve. So thank you for that, Commissioner Hanson.
Thanks.
My thanks as well. Commissioner Serban.
Hello, thank you for, hello, Ms. Erica, thank you for appearing. I'm appreciative of all your input and contributions to this process. And, I wanted to ask, you had suggested that we consider additional region-specific language needs in order to promote deeper engagement. Are you prepared to provide us with some suggested languages that we might consider?
Yes, I am. I mean, if we brought this up, we are based in City Heights. So I can say in City Heights, there's a huge concentration of Somalis and the Somali community. So that would be a language for City Heights as well as Oromo. And even in El Cajon, there's a high increase of Afghan folks coming in. And so they, for example, would need Pashto Dari. There's often a misconception that Afghans speak Farsi, and some would say they do, but generally, like they would need their own language, Pashto Dari, in El Cajon, City Heights, Somali, Oromo, even Swahili. There's a huge growing community throughout the Congo and other countries that speak Swahili. I can give a more deeper list. I can follow up on email. And I'm sure there are other organizations, like I've said, around the county who are working with really specific language needs that often get overlooked for various reasons. So thank you for that question.
Sure. And then you also mentioned, you suggested that partnering with trusted messengers in the community would allow us to have a deeper engagement with the public. I'm wondering, do you have suggestions on how to identify those potential trusted partners and how to develop those relationships? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we don't necessarily have to have that conversation right now, but like, are you a resource to whom we can turn for that?
Yeah, and like I mentioned, a lot of those trusted messengers were part of the Count Me 2020 initiative, where actually United Way was the lead in San Diego. So a lot of those organizations their information is publicized on the website, but I would also be more than happy to connect with that and follow up with who those partners would be. I know a lot of different people have called in throughout those meetings. So I'd encourage, even following up with those people, and even making it public that you want this partnership with them. I think sometimes organizations don't realize that this is something that they can do, or even that you all would be interested in hearing from them and working with them.
Okay. And lastly, I'm not sure how we've contemplated doing this, or if we've already done it. My question is, with public input at our future meetings, do we have the capability, or should we consider having the capability of having live interpretation to provide language access to folks who may not be able to give public input in English? Yes,
ideally. I mean, I guess maybe I should have been more explicit with it. Yeah, we are asking that, and we recommend that you do have live interpretation, so someone can in the moment just respond to you and even have the meeting fully interpreted back to them. Because, oftentimes people feed off of each other in these testimonies and are like, yeah, that person was right. I also live there and I really want to uplift what they're saying. So would really encourage that. If you do on Zoom, there's Zoom features like the channels, there's different call-in features. We have a list of recommendations we sent to the State Commission. Be happy to share logistically if it's on virtually or even in person, what that would look like. But ideally, that would be the best case scenario. Because I believe your meetings now offer interpretation by request, but if you let people know, maybe it's not every meeting, but you say this meeting on July 11th will have Spanish interpretation for the full meeting, and that way folks who speak Spanish can come to the meeting and have it. And then maybe, or you say from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. we'll have Arabic interpretation. I mean, these are just ideas depending on what you and the staff deem is best and most feasible, but that would be the best opportunity, so people don't have to rely on a family member to call in and submit to them, or have to rely on their kids, or an organization even to advocate for them.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate those suggestions, and thank you for being prepared to address them.
Of course. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you both. I have Commissioner Pons, and unless there are any other comments, we'll wrap up after that. So Commissioner Pons, please.
I think I'm frozen.
We can hear you now, I think.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a connection problem.
Yes. Can you? I am having
Yes,
terrible problems. I would just. You can hear me now? Okay. Great. Organization affiliated with refugee.net.
No.
Coming through now still?
Yes, sir. And now it's out again, I'm afraid.
That's okay. Don't worry about it.
Ms. Ericott, I'll ask you, if you don't mind, we'll find a way to communicate Commissioner Pond's comment and question to you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Nicole and Liberty both have my email. I know there's Brown Act specific things, but they also have my phone number. So any way that you'd like to, I would be more than happy to answer that question.
Right. Well, on behalf of the commission, let me again offer the thanks and appreciation I think you've already heard, especially having all the ideas and suggestions, because not only are they valuable to hear from you and your colleagues, but also it helps us to start framing even in more detail how we might proceed on this and think about some new ideas. So I'm sure this is just the initial step in a direct dialogue about it. I invite you and any of your colleagues to feel free to contact us at any time. I'm sure we'll be reaching out. And I also want to invite any other members of the public. Having this kind of presentation where we hear more about not just what your community is thinking of or what it's faced in the past, but some concrete ideas that might help move things along and we can get that dialogue going. I think everyone who's listening heard a lot of interest and constructive comments from the commissioners themselves. So again, on behalf of the commission, thank you for your time. Thank you for the presentation, and I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Thank you all so much. I know it's tight on schedule. I really want to express my gratitude for giving me the time to present and ask those questions. It really means a lot, especially coming from a community that has been historically underrepresented in the redistricting process and the census, like so many others in the county. And we're really excited for this process. So thank you so much. And I look forward to the rest of this meeting.
Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to item 6, the monthly budget update. As commissioners will recall, at our last meeting, the IRC approved a budget increase request of $467,500 as recommended by the Budget Ad Hoc Committee and directed staff to request the additional funding from the Board of Supervisors. I've been talking to Barbara about this request, which was drafted and submitted through the county's established process for these types of requests, and my own review to ensure consistency with our proceedings and our mandated independence from the influence of the Board of Supervisors. That language, of course, is from the law. I'm pleased to say that the item will be considered by the Board of Supervisors at their upcoming meeting, I believe on June 8th. And there will be an update on the outcome at our next IRC meeting, if not sooner, from staff as communicated, but I'm sure we'll hear a formal update on June 8th. So for today, staff will provide us with the monthly budget update that I think you're all seeing on your screens, which again is an informational item with no action needed. Again, per our usual procedure, we'll hear from staff, we'll then hear from public speakers, and then invite commissioners to offer any clarifying questions or comments. Nicole Temple on the staff, again, has a few comments to introduce the report and the numbers. So let me turn over to Nicole. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Bain. Tonight, I will briefly highlight the activity since the last monthly budget update as an informational update for the Commission. First, let's look at changes to the line item budget from the IRC's action at the last meeting. As the Chair mentioned earlier, a projected budget column was added to incorporate the Commission's request to the Board of Supervisors, which includes a projected revenue increase of $467,500 and revisions to the line items for contracted services. These changes will continue to show as projected until the IRC's request has been approved by the board, hopefully on June 8th, and the funds are transferred. For monthly activity, just under $76,000 has been spent, with projected spending of just over $66,000, leaving the IRC with more than $607,000 remaining from the board's original allocation of $750,000. All expenditures over the past month were anticipated. The largest projected expenditure of about $120,000 is for the contracted services of external counsel through the March service period of this year. The projected amount includes invoices received in March and April. Next, expenditures for IT equipment includes monthly charges from the county's IT contractor for commissioner laptops, network access, and email addresses. The actual and projected amounts represent the total monthly charges through May. We've included anticipated monthly costs for IT equipment in the staff report as a point of reference. So if you're getting your calculator out like I did, you'll see that these amounts don't equal the charges reported in Oracle. This is due to timing of when the charges appear, but also to the outcome of a monthly process that staff goes through for reconciliation of IT charges performed by staff countywide. Also noted in the staff report is an update on the anticipated costs for addressing the network security requirements for all county departments, including the IRC, which we expect to be implemented in October, or by October. Moving now to the IT other category. This includes the monthly charges for the Zoom service that's hosting the commissioners' virtual meetings through May. The most recent Zoom invoice is included in the agenda materials. Next, for translation and interpretation, actual and projected expenditures of nearly $11,000 combined are for the translation of agendas up to the IRC meeting of May 13th and other website content based on the translation requirements of the California Elections Code. The actual year-to-date amount includes paid invoices from February and March and a small surcharge to recover the county's contracting and administrative costs that's required because we're using a countywide contract for translation. The projected amount includes invoices that have been received from January and April, as well as the anticipated amount for May. Staff continues to review and validate invoices on an ongoing basis and reconcile with charges in Oracle monthly and at year end. Fluctuations in monthly actuals can be due to the timing of invoice receipt and processing, any requests for invoice revisions, timing of Oracle posting, and any request for corrections to past transactions. With that, this concludes the monthly budget status update to the Commission for ongoing transparency and accountability over the use of public funds. Subject to your questions, I'll now turn back to Chairman Bain.
Thank you very much, Nicole. Before we turn to commissioners, let me ask David if there are any requests from the public to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair Bain. We did not receive any advanced requests, but if anybody would like to address the Commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time by clicking the raise hand feature on Zoom or by pressing *9 if you're dialing in by phone. And not seeing any requests to speak, this concludes public comment on this item, Chair Bing.
Thank you very much, David. I'll now invite questions and comments from commissioners, starting with Commissioner Chen.
It's kind of related to this one and the last topic. Do we have any data that says how many people access the translations that we provide? Do we know how much that those translations are being used? I guess that question is to staff.
We can look at web analytics and determine the clicks and so forth for the translated agendas. I don't have that information immediately at hand, but that's something we can look into, yes.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
And Commissioner Chen, I take your point as well as a good one overall. The more we know about how anything that's being posted or shared is being used, especially in translation costs, the better ideas we have, I think, about the point you were just making, as well as some of the things we just discussed. So thank you for that. Commissioner Serban.
Related to the earlier topic, are we planning to have costs of interpretation? Is that in our budget for when we start having public meetings? Live interpretation, I mean.
Oh, Commissioner Serban, yes, that was included in the budget, and it was included in the recommendations from the ad hoc committee as well that were approved by the commission last meeting.
Okay, it's for the 8 languages, right? Is that what we have planned for?
Yes, as required under the California Elections Code. Yeah.
Okay.
Commissioner Serban, if I can add, based on your prior comment, Chair, if that's okay, just to build on this, is the translation with 24-hour notice, we're able to schedule that. And then the other thing is, as it relates to there was something else you brought up on, what was the second thing you brought up? Oh, the trusted messengers. I'd like to offer to, in addition to what Ms. Ericat is going to send, is that the county has done a number of outreach contracts with community health workers, promotoras, and also the trusted messenger around the COVID-19, but that might give us some information regarding those entities countywide in different populations. So if that is something of interest, we're happy to share that as well, just to sort of the lessons learned and some of the activities around COVID-19 that have been going on for the last year with trusted messenger campaigns.
And also, Barbara, I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for your responsiveness to my request with regard to the details of billing for our council. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Commissioner Diaz.
I believe this is already in our new budget or projected budget, but I just wanted clarification on page 2 in the staff report at the bottom. It says costs in the IT category are expected to increase based on the VPN network that we're going to be getting soon, hopefully, and the multi-factor authentication. I'm assuming that's already included, just wasn't clear. And when would we expect that?
If I recall, the recommendation from the ad hoc committee that was approved by the commission last meeting included an increase to cover the costs for that VPN and MFA interpretation, as well as any additional costs in that category that we may incur that would be unanticipated. Yes, that was included.
Good. Thank you for that. Good to have the clarification. Commissioner Krugliak.
I have a question, kind of an extension of the translations. I just got myself very confused because I translated my Chrome browser into Swahili, and it did a great, to what I can tell, it converted Draw My California Community immediately at the click of a button. I don't know if it was right. I don't speak Swahili, but is that something that we have evaluated and considered? I mean, we're at the point now where you can put something in your ear and basically go around the world and, for the most part, communicate. Do we really need to sign up I understand wanting to bring in lots and lots more languages for interpretation, but does it have to all be done manually with, from what we've seen in the budget, quite a high cost per word? Or can we try to take advantage of some of the kind of maybe not perfect, but great technologies that are out there that would let us potentially reach many, many communities very quickly?
I can start if that's okay, Chair Bain.
Sure, go ahead.
Yes, we have evaluated it, and Commissioner Kuglak, so there's a couple things. I believe it was Commissioner Katarina who also brought up, if I'm not mistaken, the idea of using sort of the Google translator and then getting that over possibly, and correct me, Commissioner Katarina, if I'm wrong, but over to the translators to sort of do that review then sort of as a checkup, because I've seen where the Google translator has literally translated some language and the words are inappropriate with that literal translation. And it's been called to our attention in the past with some of our county efforts. So one of the ideas was have the translation company then go ahead and review it after we've used the Google translation. And if I recall correctly, the translation company said, we still have to review every word, so we still need to charge you to do that. So there really wasn't the savings there that we were seeking. So we've done the analysis a couple of different ways. We're open to any other ideas or any other input or best practices. But to answer your question, Commissioner Kuglak, we have done the analysis on the staff side, both using the Google Translator and or other translation, then maybe having the certified translators come in and review it. But that would not give us the savings that we were looking for. Where we did identify the savings, I think that was brought up before, was having the standard language translated once, the boilerplate language, and if there's no changes, then no longer having them charge us for that review of that language.
I think it's more, does it have to fall on us, I guess? I understand wanting to make everything available, but I guess have we received concerns from community members that trying those methods, and it doesn't even have to be like copying and pasting into Google Translate is awful, but I mean, just going in and translating a web page, it's the entire web page and it's still in the web page format. You still are able to click on everything. I mean, is that just not working? And I don't mean for like, you know, our minutes or things like that, although if our minutes are on a web page, it should still work. Do we have to provide that translation, or are we getting concerns from community members that the methods that are available aren't good enough?
I'll defer to the chair. For us, I think that the concern that's been brought up is here in our public input. I also don't know if this is something on the law, based on state law, that council might want to weigh in terms of the requirements. So thinking about that as well. So those would be my first initial thoughts based on your question, Commissioner.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
And Commissioner Kuglak, I'll just want to wrap that part of the conversation up. I do think we're going to need a discussion either as part of a more specific discussion on aspects of our work, or just an agenda item to talk about translation issues. Because I think several of the points you raise are important. I think Ms. Ericott's presentation covered some of the opportunities we may have where perhaps something like you were describing might be left to automation, but that real dialogue that we've got to make sure we're capturing the nuance and the meaning, not just the words in total and accurately, are going to require a little more effort and a little more probably resource. The good news, I think, is that part of that trusted messenger process is working with trusted members of the community who can interpret. And interpretation is something of an art over and above strict mechanical translation. So I think we've got a wealth of resources to go through with that, particularly from county staffs that has had to work that on any number of other issues. We've also got the unique technical requirements of having an intelligible conversation about redistricting. And I think as we move forward, we're going to need to focus on that more specifically. But I'm very, very glad you raised it now, because it's very directly related to a pretty sizable portion of our budget. Let me start to wrap the conversation up then by noting Commissioner Serban and making one last call for any other comments or questions on this agenda item. Seeing none, Commissioner Serban, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll leave it to your discretion as to whether we ought to discuss this now, but it seems to me that maybe it would be useful at some point to have some information presented to the commission as to what exactly our legal obligation is, or at least minimally, as far as what we have to provide as in translation and interpretive services. And I think, because that sets the floor, and personally, and as a commission, I think what we ought to do is obviously meet that, but try to exceed it and promote as much input and participation as possible.
Couldn't agree more, and I'm sure most of the commissioners, if not all the commissioners, agree on that. The only thing I want to think through a little bit more is the best way of discussing that, and whether it's on its own or linked to other issues. I would ask commissioners to keep thinking about it. I can tell you in the next several days, I'm going to refer back to the training continuum and see what might be available already on existing resources with that. I think Ms. Ericott mentioned that the State Commission and some of the other commissions are already wrestling with this a bit. And I do think you make a good point. We need to know the floor, but then as in everything we do, we want to go well above the floor and do all we can to make sure we're having not only good input, but good engagement. And that's kind of the bellwether I think we'll need to explore in the coming weeks. So more on that to follow, I'm sure. I know council will have a lot to say about it. I really should give them the opportunity, I think, just to wrap it up. But Marguerite or Hillary, do you want to comment on that now, or just wait till we have that more in-depth discussion? I'm afraid you're on mute.
I thought I punched that button. We can wait, because I think an organic discussion would be helpful. But I think it's important to know that there is a formula in the code, and we can bring that formula forth. But the county has actually gone beyond that formula to cover languages that are identified in the Voting Rights Act, and also identified by the California Attorney General. So we have gone beyond, but we can discuss that when the organic discussion occurs.
Right. And without meaning to create any problematic discussion, it'll be great to understand that, but I really want each and every commissioner to feel comfortable with the level of translation and the kind of translation and interpretation we're pursuing, and that it is a decision made by our commission as part of its mandate to operate as an independent body. So with that in mind, not seeing any other questions or comments, we'll move on again with thanks to Nicole and again to commissioners for the good discussion. Moving on then to agenda item 7 with a very long title, but I'll simply say it's to receive the report of the 2 ad hocs involving RFPs, with a discussion and possible action on a motion authorizing the 2 ad hocs to work with staff and council to define the role of the IRC point of contact for the contractors to be considered for adoption at a future IRC meeting. Before we begin, I want to note one technical correction for the record in the title of this item. There is a spelling error in the second instance of the word services. It should read receive report from Demographic Services RFP and Public Outreach and Engagement Services RFP ad hoc committees, or HCs. Again, this is a follow-up conversation for the IRC on a point of consideration for both RFPs regarding communication with contractors by the commission and how to move this idea and concept forward. To explain it further, I understand we'll be turning to Commissioner Inman from the Demographic Services RFP Ad Hoc Committee, though I think he's been talking to others as well within the bounds of the Brown Act. But let me ask Commissioner Inman, assuming you're the designee on this, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Bain. So this is a follow-up item. The discussion has been going on the periphery of all of these RFPs, or all of these, the 2 RFPs that have been moving through the process. And so now we want to formalize that role. So we want to move from just simply talking about it to actually formalizing the definition, the rules, and the responsibilities of this role, IRC point of contact. And to put it in context, if you think about a contractor, there are two sides to managing a relationship with a contractor. One side of it is, are you adhering to the contract itself? There has to be someone who's in charge of making sure that bills are being submitted, audits are being done, that understands the rules and regulations of contracts so that they know how to enforce them, how to follow up if there is a deviation from the contract. So there is clearly a need for that sort of role. And that is the county core here. And core stands for contracting officer representative. So that's the person who is specifically looking at the contract and is the contractor following the letter of that. They're performing audits. They're following up to verify that if they say they have 5 people working on this, that in fact there are 5 people working on it. They're helping the contractor submit bills, managing the paperwork of the contract, so on and so forth. But there's also another extremely important side of managing the relationship with the contractor, and that is from the IRC's perspective, just simply the program. Are they living up to the spirit? Are they doing what we intended them to do? Are they doing it in a fashion that is satisfactory to compliance from our side? Not just are they submitting 5 reports when they said they'd submit 5 reports. Are they actually reports that are useful, that are helping us move the process forward in a meaningful way? And that's the IRC's job. We need somebody in there, just like on the contracting side, that's our point person. We only meet, twice a month. In between our meetings, somebody has to be on point to assist and assist with the oversight, coordination, and monitoring of this contractor as a representative of the IRC. And that's essentially what we're laying out here on this slide is the responsibility is at a high level for the IRC point of contact. It's a role of monitoring, it's a role of oversight, and it is a role of coordination, because the IRC has the ultimate authority to direct and define what they're doing. That is the full IRC's job. That's what we're here for. We will provide mandates. We'll state what these contractors are supposed to do as a mandate from the IRC. Somebody needs to be monitoring on a more regular basis between IRC meetings to raise the flag and say, wait, they're not going to make the timeline. They're not going to have the quality of content we need for our next meeting. We need to bring this up at the IRC. We need to monitor and kind of look at the type of work that's being produced to make sure it's of sufficient quality that it's going to hit the mark. The point of contact clearly is not going to be telling the contractor, do this or do that. You need to produce these kinds of maps as opposed to those kinds of maps. That's the IRC's job. The contractor needs to bring all maps to the IRC. The IRC then tells the contractor what maps, or if it's the public outreach, what meetings you need to set up and organize. It's not the point of contact doing that. So we need to make that very clear. The IRC is not, or the IRC retains all authority to direct the activities. The table here at the bottom is the thing that we need to further flesh out. And so this is the motion is going to be asking for your authority to move forward in clearly defining these roles, because the point of contact clearly has to work in coordination with the county core person. They can't work independently. It's not going to work, right? Certain things the county core person would lead on, certain things the IRC point of contact would have the lead on. Some things would be joint. And so this is just a first brush at how we see those things falling. Clearly, there are going to be more duties and tasks that need to be outlined here. And, this is our version of an initial assignment of whether it's joint, lead, support. By no means do we see these as being the be-all, end-all. That's what we're asking you to provide us some guidance and direction on, and kind of outlining how you see these roles, or specifically how you see the IRC point of contact role, and where it needs to lead and where CORE can lead. So if you want to go ahead and move on to the next slide, I'll just go ahead and put up the motion. And the motion is asking for the authority to move forward with further defining, or not further defining, actually to define the role of IRC point of contact. And we'll bring that forward in a future IRC meeting for approval by the full IRC. This is a timely issue. So, if we get the authority to do this, we need to move quickly, and we need to bring this motion. The future IRC meeting would be June 10th, essentially, is what we'd be targeting. So I just want to make that clear. And so with that, Chair, other people on the two ad hoc committees, clearly, if you have other comments, please provide them at this point.
Hearing none.
I
Commissioner
think
Diaz?
Barbara had her hand
Oh,
up.
I'm
and
sorry,
Sonia.
I couldn't see well. So let's take Commissioner Hanson first and then Commissioner Diaz. For now, just clarifying comments from members of the ad hoc committees. So Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you. Could you go back to the first screen that showed the definition and the little chart? Because I have a question about this. First of all, if you look at the bottom, we're talking about two different people, the IRC point of contact and the county COR. But at the top, we're talking about that we're saying that the definition is for the IRC contract for point of contact. And yet we're describing really the COR's responsibility, I think. So
yeah, you're right. I mean,
it's
we
very
only have the
confusing
authority.
because I can't keep track of which position we're talking about. Because down in the chart, it's very clear that there are two different jobs here. One is a commissioner and the other is a county employee. And then we divide the responsibilities between those two positions. And it seems to me that oversight on the third one down is absolutely the responsibility of the commission and only the commission. The county staff does not play a part in the oversight or what's the difference between oversight and quality of performance? I understand that the county needs to make sure that they're following the contract and providing the correct kind of financial data. But when it comes to the oversight of the work, I feel very strongly that this is our responsibility as a commission. And we need to be clear of that because that's where the public is going to criticize. And that's the way it should be. I mean, and whether the public criticizes or not, but we need to be clear on that. And this comparison to me is confusing because it's hard to tell which person you're talking about.
Commissioner Inman, do you want to respond to that now or respond to it when we get into the further discussion?
I think this fuels the further discussion. So it's a relevant point, and I think it's useful to fuel further discussion. So yeah.
Okay. We'll come back to that, Commissioner Hanson, I promise, in just a minute. Commissioner Diaz, did you have something you wanted to add at this stage?
No, I'll hold off to discussion.
Okay, good. So let me leave this slide up for a minute, and then I'm going to go through the process. We actually had a discussion with the co-vice chairs and staff about whether we really needed to vote on this, because it's arguable that we could deal with some of the points that Commissioner Hanson just raised, for example, and some of the other things that Commissioner Inman, I think, said need to be further refined. I decided that it would be useful to have a vote for mainly two reasons. One, we wanted to make absolutely sure the commission was comfortable with the ad hoc committees providing this input. I think there's a certain amount of common sense that applies there, but I didn't want to have any doubts about whether this is the way we want to go. We want to hear from the ad hoc committee about best ways to pursue this. And second point for justifying a motion and a vote on this, to have a starting point in mind. And I would say it's not just the tasks that are listed here, the tasks that are listed in the box, but the kinds of thing Commissioner Hanson just brought out that I think we can hand to the ad hoc committees to develop and refine and make very, very clear. I'm going to save more comment on that in just a minute. So let me ask to take the slide down at this point. We can bring it back up if we need to. And let me just preview a little bit about what's next. I am going to turn to Barbara Jimenez in a moment because I want to update a related issue to this that relates to what we've been hearing at today's meeting and our last meeting regarding specific aspects of the Demographic Services RFP. Then I'll ask for clarifying questions in general from the commission. Then we'll have public comment. And then, assuming the commission is so inclined, we'll accept a motion and have a discussion under that motion. That's my intent at this point. I know it sounds a little laborious, but I want to make sure we're fulfilling all our requirements. So as a first step, let me please ask Barbara to provide an update on issues related to the Demographic Services RFP.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. I just wanted to advise the full IRC that currently, as all of you know, the demographer RFP has closed and proposals received are being evaluated by the Source Selection Committee, or the SSC, based on the evaluation criteria that this IRC approved on April 22nd. The ad hoc committee in drafting the RFP did not specifically ask about present or past litigation in the offeror's response. However, the SSC or the Source Selection Committee can choose to ask for this information now and any other clarifications it deems necessary as part of its review. The Selection Source Committee routinely does request clarifying information as part of the RFP evaluation process, including when it becomes aware of any pertinent issues outside of the RFP process. I'd like to advise the IRC that the SSC is fully aware of the letter that was submitted on this issue and will follow its routine process based on the information received. Those are my comments. Thank you, Chair Boehm.
Thank you, Barbara. And just as a reminder to commissioners, the Selection Source Committee's recommendation will come to the full IRC, where we will have a discussion and a vote, including any matters, criteria, or concerns that commissioners may have. So we'll make sure to have that kind of discussion. All right, so next, let me ask David if there are any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. We did receive one request in advance from Arcela Nunez. I don't see either a matching name or telephone number, so I will just say that if anyone would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time by clicking the raise hand button on Zoom or by pressing *9 if you are dialing in by phone. And not seeing any requests to speak, this concludes public comment on the item.
Very good. So I know we've gone a little out of order, but let me get back now to clarifying questions and comments. Once we have those answered, we'll then move into a discussion, preferably under a motion, such as you just saw on the slide, and we'll bring that back up in a moment. But let me ask for clarifying questions, comments first, starting with Commissioner Inman.
Yes, thank you very much, Barbara, for the information about the RFP. One follow-up question, or hopefully it's a clarifying question about that. So it's perfectly reasonable. I understand that the SSC can go back and take the lead as issues arise to get clarifying information to support their decision. But there was no way, or how did they rank that then? Because clearly the ranking criteria that was given to the SSC doesn't include net new information that wasn't in the RFP. So is there a way that they then incorporate that information into the ranking, or how does it get included in the ranking process? That's my question.
So my understanding, I might have to defer to council, is the, actually I don't have DPC on here. So let me check on that, Commissioner Inman. I don't want to misstate my understanding of that information. But you are correct that information does come to light oftentimes during the process. Similarly, questions are asked from the proposers as well, and that information is posted. But I don't want to give you that wrong information about once the information has become known to the SSC, what is their next step that they would take because it's not in the evaluation criteria is what I hear you saying. So let me confirm that. I don't want to give you the wrong answer. And,
Okay,
if I can confirm it but in the next few minutes, or Marguerite may want to weigh in, we will try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Inman, with the indulgence of the chair, the SSC has the ability to investigate, to ask for information on issues that arise, and often do its standard process. And if you look at the scoring criteria, there are broad categories having to do with the value to the county and other similar broad categories that where all of this can be considered. It would not be within the scoring that the RFP specified, but can be considered under other rubric. And the general rubric of the value and the integrity of the contract. So I think that Barbara's suggestion that we reach out to DPC, the IRC specified a particular scoring standard. However, this information can be taken into account.
Any other clarifying questions before we move into discussing a discussion under a motion? Very good. So could we bring up the motion slide one more time? That is the actual motion. I'm going to ask for a commissioner to move and another commissioner to second, assuming there's interest in that, to have a discussion along these lines. And again, in summary, it is to authorize the ad hoc committees to work to define the role of the IRC point of contact. Commissioner Co-Vice Chair Katerina?
Well, I would like to move that we move this motion forward.
Okay. Commissioner Chen, did I hear you?
I'll second that then.
And then you'll make a second. Good. So we'll move forward on that basis. Let's take the motion down again, mainly because it will help my eyesight in flipping my mouse so that I can see everyone as we go. All right. I have Commissioner Diaz, Commissioner Serban, and then Commissioner Larson. So Commissioner Diaz, please.
Thank you, Chair Bain. First of all, Ken, thank you so much for your presentation. I want to recognize also some of the public comments that were made today on the need to make sure that any contractors that we're hiring do not have a history of collusion with politicians or have any history of gerrymandering. This is a concern that's been front and center of my mind since the very beginning, as it also relates to this agenda item that we're speaking about regarding oversight. The public's perception of us as an independent commission is by far the most important aspect of our job as commissioners. This is why we bring up this topic of oversight, to make it clear that we, the Independent Redistricting Commission, are fulfilling the public's best interests and the law to ensure that the redistricting process, from the hiring of the contractors to the expenditures of our taxpayer dollars to the organizing of all of the public meetings, is transparent and provides the best quality services and ensures the broadest participation. As I've had the privilege of working with staff by serving as the interim vice chair and also on various ad hoc committees. And, I do have to thank staff for all of the contributions that they've made to help get this commission started. because it's hard work. I understand. I've been in your shoes. I have been a staff person in a government entity before, so I know what kind of pressure you all are working under to meet deadlines. At the same time, when we were sworn in as commissioners, we inherited what was given to us in the interim, which was the processes that were set up by the Department of Procurement, our legal counsel, and the staff. So the decisions were made for us that we could have in theory done ourselves. But we actually, if you looked at our earlier meetings, we actually did push back a little bit. And especially when this RFP was first presented to us, that we were not, 100% in agreement with the sort of the process of selection. So that's why we went back and created these ad hoc committees. So I don't have to repeat, the whole story of how we came to this point, but I just really want to make the point that, our greater role, we've come at a crossroads right now. This proposal for point of contact is our compromise that I feel best represents our role, as it makes it very clear to the public and the contractors on who is reporting to whom. And there are still some things in that draft agreement itself that need to be clarified. Because if we found it was boilerplate language that we did not have access to while drafting the RFP statement of work. And I'm glad that staff is willing to work with us to clarify that language. So that time we onboard these consultants, everything is crystal clear. Staff is here to support our work, not work against us, obviously, or do all the work for us. This is not a passive role that we're in. We're not here to rubber stamp things that are presented to us. And I do believe we've been very active in voicing our concerns. And so I want to thank all of the commissioners for that. Just keep asking questions and doing our due diligence to fully understand all of the information that's presented to us. So sorry, I will stop talking, but that's what I wanted to say for the record. And I really do appreciate all of the hard work that's gone in to creating this. And I really hope we can move forward on the best solution.
Commissioner Diaz, thank you for those comments. With due respect for time, but even more respect for commissioners' interest in talking about it, my current list is Commissioner Serban, Commissioner Larson, Commissioner Co-Vice Chair Katerina, Commissioner Chen, Commissioner Pons. We'll just keep working through the list as we go. Commissioner Serban.
Since we've been advised that it appears as if we can appropriately consider our demographer's prior performance in our awarding of the contract, I advise the members of the SSC to in fact seek that information because I anticipate that that information would be the full IRC will ask for that when it's brought forward to the commission. And I apologize, but I wasn't able to ask this on when the questions were being asked. But Barbara, you had mentioned that there's a routine process that's followed based on when information is received. I was kind of curious what you meant by that. Like, what is that routine process?
Sure. Chair Boehm, if I may. Thank you, Commissioner Serban. So the routine process is similar to what happened in this. Either it comes through public information, a letter might be received, information might be sent through the Department of Purchasing and Contract, that there's some sort of information that the SSC should consider. So the routine process is to make them aware of that and then for their consideration. It is a confidential process, so that information is shared with them and then they sort of discuss that and have the chair and then consult with DPC if it's necessary. Similarly, the other way around is when the proposers are having questions. And I think the ad hoc committee on the public outreach and engagement already was privy to this. If there's questions that come up for clarifications, then those are researched and answered and then posted publicly as part of our BINET. And I hope that answers your question. I guess the other answer is it also is not one set way, but when information comes to the purchasing department in different facets, it's made depending on where the process is of the SSC available to the SSC.
Thank you, Barbara. And before I sign off, I just wanted to echo Commissioner Diaz's sentiments, and I appreciate you sharing that and the way you did. I think it's very important to just remember that those values are ones that we should aspire to.
Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner.
Excuse me. Okay. I've added Commissioner Krugliak, but we're going to turn next to Commissioner Larson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to fully concur with the remarks of the Commissioner Diaz and Commissioner Hanson. Speaking as a member of the ad hoc committee for the demographics RFP, it seems like we've been in this process forever. Really, it's only been a few months, but it's just dozens of meetings. I think where we are right now in time, this is a compromise. I fully support the proposal we have, and I recommend each of my fellow commissioners support it. But to just give a little more clarification here, the IRC was not on the source selection committee. Many have wanted to be on the source selection committee because that's the only way they'll get the input from us and understand what our concerns really are. But we didn't really have a choice, so we're not on the SSC, and we're just waiting with bated breath to find out what they're going to do. So that's part of the compromise. Secondly, the contracting officer's representative is mentioned in the boilerplate of the RFP material, which we only saw when it was finished. Although the three of us on the ad hoc committee literally wrote what we did, but we never saw the boilerplate. And now speaking as a contractor to the government for many years, who's looked at many, many contracts, usually the RFP language turns into the contract and all the boilerplate becomes the contract. The contracting officer's representative, the COR, is the only one mentioned in that boilerplate. Nowhere is the IRC even mentioned, except in the fine print in the stuff that we wrote. But in the boilerplate that the contractor is legally required to adhere to, he only reports to the government. And somehow we have to change that. And I think that'll be discussed in more meetings to come. But in the meantime, let's vote for this motion so we can go ahead and keep moving. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments, and thanks to the earlier comments from commissioners. I especially want to express thanks to all of you and to the others to come for providing more insights on how the ad hoc committee discussion went, what kind of concerns emerged from that. That I think is fully in keeping with the kind of transparency and clarity we want to provide the public in all our discussions, even beyond just our regular meetings. Moving along, I've got, just to review, Co-Vice Chair Katerina, Commissioner Chen, Commissioner Pons, and Commissioner Krugliak. So Co-Vice Chair Katerina, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Bain. I just wanted to point out to everyone that we have a number of criteria that we need to consider when we are working on our maps. And the first is that our districts need to be an equal population. The second one is that we need to comply with the Voting Rights Act. So everything that we do when we look at these maps and everything we do with our demographer needs to take that second consideration and comply with the Voting Rights Act. Certainly, I don't want to hire a demographer that has had a lot of violations. And I don't think that we are going to be in that position, but we do need to be careful and considerate when we review our demographer RFP choice from the source selection committee. And Ken, if it's okay, do you want me to reference Barbara's comment about the role of the COR and the county's role, or do you want to handle that later?
No, please do. Yeah.
Okay, so earlier, Commissioner Hanson mentioned that she had some concerns over the role of the county COR, as they call it. And I don't know if you can bring that slide up, Barbara, the first one that Ken had shared. So we had a meeting, Ken and I had a meeting with county staff and legal counsel to talk about how to make this point of contact work efficiently, because we do have to work with county staff. The county COR position, if you want to think about it, is a position that exists in the county for every contract that they do to make sure that public money is being spent appropriately. And certainly we want to support that effort. And this is a role that they have clearly defined in their processes. So we looked at what we thought that the IRC point of contact would do and what would be done jointly with the county's COR, or something that they would be leading and we would be supporting, or vice versa. So you can see in the division of responsibilities that, for example, they are leading contract enforcement and audit. And that is a process that is something that they have clearly defined and that their staff is trained to do, where we are not. So it made sense, obviously, for them to lead that function. And to the extent that we have joint oversight, they are going to be looking at certain things, and we're going to be looking at other issues. There are certain things that they're going to look for. And we want to make sure that we work with them and support them when needed, and they want to work with us and support us when needed. So I think we came up with at least a very good framework for how to best move forward with our joint relationship, if you will. And I'm hoping that, you know, what ideally we'd like to do is, if this motion is passed, that we can then move forward to the next step of actually very clearly defining both roles and providing information to you so that you can understand how everything will be divided up and how we'll have the clear lines of communication that we really need to be successful in as we're moving this forward. And I hope that clarifies your concern, Commissioner Hanson.
Thank you for that. Could we go ahead and take the slide down again? Very good. So Commissioner Chen is next on my list, please.
So I'm not sure if this is the right time to bring this up, but it's been discussed so far. So I just want to express that I'm not in favor of screening consultants out because they've developed maps that have been challenged. I think consultants do what they're told to do by their people that hire them. I think the politicians were responsible for those maps, and just like we'll be responsible for what our consultants do, and they'll do what we tell them to do. So I'm just not in favor of using that as a screening process because I don't think the consultant's responsible for that. I think it's the politicians that did it.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Pons.
Okay, I'm going to try this again. If I get blanked out or disconnected, just proceed on. I do apologize earlier. I like the format and the proposal. I think it's worthwhile. So I want to congratulate the ad hoc committee on the work they've done to date. So I think it's really relevant. The second thing is regarding Commissioner Hanson's comments, I think they are very valid. And that's part of the discussion in the proposal and the motion itself. If we move the motion forward, we can resolve those discussions and differences and then come to an agreement as the commission should do. Going back to Commissioner Chen's point regarding litigation, the allegation is not I don't think it's the grounds for deselection. But I do believe that the results of that litigation should be grounds for deselection, and we should keep that in consideration. And the last thing is going back to what Ms. Jimenez says. The SSC can, she said the SSC can ask the question regarding litigation, past litigation. I would change that to say the SSC should ask the question regarding litigation because words matter. And so I am ready to move the motion forward. I think it's a good proposal. And thanks to the ad hoc committee.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Kugliak and then Commissioner Servin.
I have a couple of really quick things. The first one is, given that we want, I think we're all in agreement that we want the SSC to request this additional information and somehow appropriately consider it in the review. Do we need to update the motion to reflect that? Or is that just covered under the current process of requesting additional information? And broadly, should we give more direction than just letting the SSC take it under the broad criteria that that Marguerite referred to previously?
Let me ask Marguerite and then Barbara to chime in on that, Commissioner, if you don't mind, and then we'll address the rest of your comments. So Marguerite.
Commissioner Kugliak, I want to express that the RFP in its boilerplate already permits this to be taken into account. So it would be my view that you do not need to enhance your motion. The boilerplate is written so that contracts are let with full information. And there were paragraphs that specifically allowed this type of information that comes in, first of all, actually to be affirmatively requested. And I think that and there are areas in the scoring where this information would be pertinent. At this point, I think it would be procedurally difficult to change the RFP, but I do believe your RFP is adequate to the task.
Okay, thank you. My second question is actually for you. The comments that we've received on this topic request that any allegation or any challenge to demographer's map basically to exclude the demographer from consideration. And I'm more in agreement with Commissioner Pons that perhaps an allegation need not. My question for you is, I think mentally it seems like there's a very different possible prior here. The prior is any allegation is so rare that it almost would only be challenged under the Voting Rights Act if it was an egregious violation. But the other one is almost every map gets challenged. The Voting Rights Act is very broad, and so lots of maps get challenged under the Voting Rights Act, at which point we should consider these two things very, very differently. In your experience, which one is it?
Well, there are a number of aspects in there. Allegations of a Voting Rights Act violation can be used to bring down an otherwise adequate map for political purposes. So I think the allegation, I think, needs to be known. The outcome needs to be known, and the circumstances need to be known, in my view. So it is not an exclusive focus of one or the other, but a holistic view of the outcome of litigation and the role of the contractor. It could have been that you have a contractor up there advising against a plan, and yet the governing body says, no, that's the one we want. So it's a bigger world of information, but it is the world of information that is pertinent and can be garnered under the contract, under the RFP as it exists.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was hoping to hear. And my last comment is just a very small one, which is as the RFP ad hoc goes back and puts together the proposal around roles, I know you all will lay out the details, but I just want to second Commissioner Hansen's feedback that really we are the oversight for this contractor. And so I know you all will lay out who does what, but I would second her feedback, and that's kind of what I would hope to see when it comes out in detail.
Thank you very, very much for those comments and the dialogue. So much to say, but I don't want to interrupt the flow. Commissioner Serban, and then I think Commissioner Diaz. No, just Commissioner. Okay, Commissioner Serban, and that might be the list. So please be thinking and preparing for the vote. Commissioner Serban, go ahead, please.
Just a quick question. The county core, COR, is that an acronym?
Would you like me to respond, Chair Babe?
Please.
Yes, it is. If this is helpful, so the CORE stands for Contracting Officer Representative. We have an 8-page procedures on with lots of references that we're happy to share. It was shared with our ad hoc committee representatives that talks about the roles of the CORE, the background, the training, the responsibilities, the expectations. They're responsible for, the monitoring, the review of the invoices, the performance. They're held to this. There are also extensive training. If they don't do the training, their rights are taken away from being the CORE. We're happy to share this with the committee that works for it, whoever needs it. There's quite extensive amount of information, but it talks about their delegation, role, and responsibilities in a nutshell. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
And thank you for raising it, because it's an important one that will need to be part of the discussion in refining and defining the rules of the POC. Commissioner Diaz, and then Commissioner Brown. No problem. That's good. Commissioner Diaz, Commissioner Brown, I do want to make this the final round of requests for speaking. Good. So Commissioner Diaz.
Yeah, in the RFP agreement as it's currently published on BINET, it does have some ineligibility and exclusion suspension debarment clause in there. But I was wondering if, and maybe this is a discussion for the ad hoc, but I believe we did discuss the possibility of adding some kind of addendum or something to address some of these issues that have come up, especially with the point of contact and the now with the Voting Rights Act stuff, because that's very specific to the redistricting. So I just want some clarification, I guess, from a legal standpoint, because I'm not, again, like, I don't know if we should have getting to Commissioner Krugliak's point about, do we need an additional to say something in addition here to what the current motion is? I just want to revisit, because the light bulb just went off in my head.
If I may, Chair Bain.
Please.
The responses to the proposals are already in. And of course, the IRC could reject all of them. In other words, this came up after the submission date. So it was not something that was responded to by the contractors. And that RFP was approved by the IRC. The matter came up after the fact, but the boilerplate, how the county operates with boilerplate, works to the advantage of the county, and in this particular instance, to the advantage of the IRC, and permits the consideration of issues that it expressly says that are not necessarily information requested in the RFP. and the scoring criteria are broad enough to allow their consideration. At this point, it would be my view that you don't need to change your RFP. You can, this information, the SSC is aware of it. And your ultimate option would be at this point, at your very next meeting, to reject the recommendation. And then we would be starting over. But the submissions are already in. So it's not possible now it is with the SSC. Everything is with the SSC.
Right, and that, I wasn't referring to the RFP itself, but actually the draft agreement that the contractor.
That is going to be negotiated, Commissioner Diaz.
Correct.
Yeah, subject to negotiation, totally.
Okay, that clarifies a lot. Thank you. I know that the RFP's already been approved. We don't want to go back and
No.
mess with that. I just want to make sure that we still have that.
No. The contract will be negotiated.
I want to give Barbara Jimenez a chance to comment if she wants to.
Council covered it very well. Thank you.
Appreciate the brevity. I do want to just speak wearing a hat just as another commissioner for the moment, but to inform how I see this. I would feel very differently about this entire set of questions if the RFP and the SSC's recommendation wasn't coming back to us. But because we have that opportunity in the process we blessed, I think we'll have the chance both to raise the visibility of this issue with regard to the SSC's result and, Commissioner Diaz, as you rightly brought out, to the ongoing and future negotiation of the actual contract. All of which is to say, as I think several commissioners have mentioned, the Voting Rights Act is not a commitment that simply disappears once we've selected a demographer. In fact, it remains at the heart of our work. And I think all the commissioners are united on that, and will continue to do all we can to make sure the Voting Rights Act is respected, implemented, and applied throughout our work and throughout any of our projects up to including the maps. So thank you for that. Commissioner Brown, and then I'm planning to call for the vote.
Okay, real quick, and we may have gone through this, but I'm wondering, once we have the submissions for the RFP, are we obligated to ask each of those submissions whether they've had any, because we didn't ask it as part of the RFP, whether they've had any prior violations of the Voting Rights Act, or only the one that we kind of hone it down to, or the two that we hone it down to as far as consideration for the final contract? Is it, is there some kind of bias there if we leave it just down to the last two, and do we get in trouble for that, or?
Commissioner, Chair, how I think this is going to work, Commissioner Hanson, is
It's Commissioner Brown, actually.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Brown, and I apologize.
It's okay.
The SSC will make a recommendation, but in that recommendation, it will review all of the submissions. And you will be provided the information that you need in writing to accept or reject the recommendation. You will have all the information.
So they will ask all of the submissions,
yes,
whether they've been in violation? Okay.
Yes, it's not fair to ask only one person. No, it would be asked to all. It would be asked to all.
Okay, thank you.
Chair Boehm, may I add to what
Please.
Marguerite just mentioned? Just also the report that's coming back to the full IRC will be a very detailed report, and a copy of the proposal submitted will also be available, of course, for the full IRC.
Thank you for that. All right. Seeing no further comments on the motion, David, would you please call the roll for a vote?
Thank you, Chair Boehm. Commissioner Inman. I think you're muted.
Aye.
Commissioner Krugliak. I missed that. It looks like an aye. I think we have a mute problem, but I feel like an aye to me. Commissioner Larson.
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Serban,
Aye.
Commissioner Russ,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson,
Aye.
Chair Bame,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Pons,
Aye.
Commissioner Brown,
Aye.
Commissioner Garcia,
Aye.
believe Commissioner Dostal is still absent. Commissioner Katerina,
Aye.
Commissioner Diaz.
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously with all commissioners who are present voting aye.
Thank you very much, and thank you, commissioners. This is a moment that I've both been dreading and looking forward to. I'm going to suggest some homework because, assuming, as we've heard, that the ad hoc committees are going to come back with a specific recommendation that establishes and defines the points of contact at our next meeting on June 10th, we need to be ready to have points of contact and commissioners to serve as them in each of the point of contact roles for each of the RFP. So to keep that process moving as smoothly and efficiently as possible, I'd ask each of you to consider whether you would be willing and able to serve as a point of contact for one of the respective two positions. I want to emphasize that without prejudicing or second guessing the recommendations that we may get on June 10th, that the respective point of contact roles likely will not require very, very specific and extensive work experience in either demography or public relations. Rather, I think what we'll be looking for will be some skills along the lines of liaison, good time management, solid organizational, and perhaps most importantly, solid team skills and interpersonal skills to oversee performance effectively, communicate clearly with all other relevant players, and keep the full commission informed so that the IRC can fulfill its responsibility to define and direct contractor activities, as was presented earlier. I'll ask any commissioners interested to email your interest to Barbara Jimenez by 5 p.m. on June 2nd, next week. And in that email and expression of interest, please include a description of your interest and any experience you may wish to share. The reason I'm asking you to do that now is that I will, as chair, unless there's objection or doubt, go ahead with selecting that point of contact from the commissioners who've expressed interest and inform the commission of those selections in line with the relevant agenda item and any decisions we make on June 10th. So in other words, please think about whether you want to serve. If you do, please provide your willingness to do so and a statement of interest that can be reviewed by 5 p.m. on June 2nd. And my goal is that, assuming we'll want to move forward and approve the points of contact, that we can actually name them on June 10th as well, with my selection being presented to you at that time. Any questions about any of those next steps? Excellent. Thank you again. I really appreciate the discussion. I know we're taking time to go through it, but I think the commission's interest in doing so, it was important to have that kind of conversation. So we move on now to item 8, an opportunity for the commission's remaining ad hoc committees to provide very brief reports on their work and updates on their activities. In keeping with our usual procedures, we'll hear from the ad hoc committee member presenting on behalf of the committee, then from the public, and then invite commissioners to offer clarifying questions or comments. I'd again ask, as always, to keep these questions and comments brief, bearing in mind there's no action to be taken in this meeting on any of these reports. The first update will come from the Ad Hoc Committee on Redistricting, Outreach, and Communication. I think you'll remember the mandate, but I'm happy to repeat it later if needed. I did want to note that this update will include more on the upcoming education tour, and I'll again turn to Co-Vice Chair Rosette Garcia for a presentation. Rosette, please.
Thank you, Chair Bame. Actually, I do want to keep that flyer up, if you don't mind. We are moving at pace with our educational tour, The first tour is scheduled for next week. That's District 5, as you can see up there, and all the other dates are up there. I want to point out that the District 1 event on June 16th is going to be offered in both Spanish and English. And attendees will be able to select simultaneous translation to hear the presentation in Spanish. And I don't know, Barbara, if there's anything else that you want to add to that. I'm not sure. I quite understand how it happens, but it's a simultaneous translation. Our commissioners will be presenting in English. Don't worry, commissioners from District 1. You don't have to take a total language immersion class between now and then to present in Spanish. But Barbara, was there anything else, or Liberty, that you wanted to add about how that works?
So Vice Chair Garcia, thank you. We've used the simultaneous translation on a number of events, and it's relatively easy. On the bottom, there's a little world, and you just hit, if you want Spanish. We've done it in other languages as well. And you are able to, it's all simultaneous at the same time. So while the speaker is speaking, and you can say, I want it in English or I want it in Spanish, and then you're able to listen to it at the same time. So we have used it multiple times, and no issues and concerns. I myself have also listened to it in the Spanish just to kind of get a sense of how they're doing, and it's worked very well. No concerns on our end.
Thank you. So we have as you all know, a sort of a master, a template presentation. Each of the commissioners from the districts will be tailoring them a little bit for the district and for the commissioners who are presenting. We also made some other revisions since the last time you saw it in response to feedback from commissioners. I hope that those of you who made some comments noticed that we did respond. But in any case, we really don't expect for the presentation to change substantially. I guess I should say the content should stay substantially the same, because we want the information that we're presenting in all the meetings to be consistent. But I know that there's maybe some slides that are going to get moved around and that sort of thing, and staff would really like to be advised of all of that, so that they can be sure to have the correct slides in the correct order for you all. This flyer that you see is in the process of being translated into 8 languages. The staff have already started distributing it, to all of their distribution lists, and we have already started to get RSVPs. So I'm excited to report that the District 5 event next week has already gotten, we're in double digits, so that's great. And I think District 2, if I'm not mistaken, already has had a number of RSVPs, and I'm sure they're going to keep the RSVPs will keep coming in. We plan to do actually some targeted outreach as well, and we're looking at that, at perhaps having maybe over the chair's signature, or over the signature, emails directly from commissioners from the district, targeting specific organizations or individuals in different areas, and in particular, perhaps people who have come to our meetings and spoken at our meetings, or just organizations that we know of who we want to maybe send a personal invitation to. And I think there's a press release that may be going out soon, one that is being drafted. And let's see, just want to mention again that these are educational events. They are not public hearings. So these meetings are not an opportunity for us to take any input on maps, drawing maps, where boundaries should go. That kind of, those opportunities for the public to provide that kind of input will come later, because this is not the only engagement we're going to do with the community. As you all know, we will be looking to engage basically from here on throughout the process with public hearings, and then the public hearings that we'll have when we start drawing maps. And I think that was all I plan to cover. The other members of the outreach committee, if you have anything else you'd like to add, please feel free to do so now. And otherwise, I'll turn it back to Chair Boehm and we can take questions if there are any.
Let me invite Commissioner Serban as a member of the ad hoc committee if you wanted to weigh in now.
I just wanted to thank the staff for all the work that they've done. This is a enormous undertaking, and also to my fellow commissioners for committing to doing this educational tour. I'm very happy that we had achieved the buy-in from the rest of you, and committing to these dates and getting this tour off the ground. I guess I could wait, but to do the question thing, but I guess maybe now sounds like a good time to ask it anyway. My question would be, for the staff, is it possible to develop, or have we already done some sort of template social media posts or other ways that we as individual commissioners can assist in maybe doing this, promoting this event, or how else can we as commissioners help in ensuring the success of this tour?
Chair Bain, would you? I can
Please go ahead.
We are working with our county communications for the social media. We've discussed the next door paid, potentially paid Facebook ads, the press release that Vice Chair Garcia mentioned, Twitter and Facebook posting. And so the other thing is, I definitely think, and I'll have council correct me if I'm wrong, but with this being an education tour, I definitely think that this is a great opportunity for the commissioners also to retweet it and tweet it, and all of the other efforts. I know I'll be tweeting it on my county tweet, and then please feel free to send us any ideas on the targeted outreach. As Vice Chair Garcia mentioned, there's the individual message that we're crafting for the chair and others to sort of forward on and reach out to your own groups. We're open to all ideas, and our county communications is also ready to assist. They were a little bit tied up the last couple of weeks with budget presentations, and so we didn't want to compete with that either, but they're ready to assist, and we're open to any and all ideas.
I forgot to mention that, again, since these are educational events, but they are not publicly noticed agendized meetings. So we have to be very careful that no more than 6 commissioners attend any of these meetings. So if you would like to go to a meeting at which you're not presenting, let the staff know, let Barbara and Liberty know, so they can keep track of that. And I guess we'll probably just say first come, first serve, maybe. I don't know how we're gonna lottery if we have more than 6 commissioners who have indicated interest in attending a meeting.
Rosette, we kind of discussed also that the meetings will be recorded, and so they'll be available on the website, and the commissioners can view the meeting after the fact. So I don't think that violates the Brown Act then, if they individually view them. I don't know, is that right? Like
Yeah.
Liberty, I think.
And Ms. Gibson, I noticed, just turned on her camera, and I do want to give her a chance to speak on this, please.
Well, I was gonna, I turned on my camera just to echo Barbara's prior point, that while the bylaws do prohibit substantive discussion by commissioners on social media as they're currently drafted, they don't prohibit just sharing agenda, meeting time and place, and that kind of information. Commissioner Brown, would you mind repeating your question about the Brown Act in terms of who can discuss what and when? I want to make sure that I'm answering your right question here.
As we do our presentations, if other commissioners decide to watch the presentations before they come up for their own presentation, and there happens to be more than 6 of us together in one present, I mean, they're not going to be making any presentation, they're just going to be attending it and viewing it. Does that violate the Brown Act if there's more than 6 of the commissioners in one activity?
So it would, the Brown Act will prohibit a discussion of commission business or matters within the commission's jurisdiction by a majority of commissioners. And so, even if you aren't officially all in the same place at the same time, a meeting is construed more broadly than that. And so it would reach that. And that's the thought of limiting even these more unofficial activities to less than a majority of commissioners.
So it doesn't even come up as a problem, but they can always view the recording of that presentation after the fact. And that doesn't present any problem for the Brown Act.
Yes, just viewing a public meeting of commissioners on their own would be just fine. And of course, staff can work with the commission to get it on an agenda if there's something that the full commission wants to discuss about the tours and how they're going, as a kind of check-in would be the way to handle that.
In fact, I can tell you, we will do a reality check because we'll be in the middle of the tours. And if there are lessons learned or particular points that need to be brought out, we'll have that in our next meeting. Commissioner Diaz, if you don't mind, let me allow the public to make comment if they have any right now, and then we'll come back and continue the conversation. David, are there any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item?
We did not receive any requests to speak in advance on this item. If any member of the public would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak, that concludes public comment on the item. Chair Bain.
Very much. Commissioner Diaz.
Thanks, I'll be brief. Just noting that asking the outreach ad hoc to please consider after business hours, evening educational tour times. I know we're in the only District 4 that has one after 6. So just wanted to throw that out there because that is something that would be very, very accessible. And if the meetings are going to be recorded, we should be making an effort to publicize that a little bit more, especially in the press releases that we're doing. So.
Duly noted, and a very good point. And I'll ask staff to just keep working on that and looking at that, and remind commissioners, if you are sending out notice to some of your friends and colleagues that you'll be participating, or there's an event that is specific to your district, do remind that it's being recorded and it's on the website, and here's the link. Always invaluable to make things available to people at different times in different ways. So thank you for that, Commissioner. Any other comments or questions? Very good. So again, thank you, Co-Vice Chair Garcia, for that excellent presentation. Thanks to my fellow commissioners on the ad hoc committee, and thank you all for the good discussion, including staff and council. Much appreciated. The next ad hoc that we'll be hearing from, or the update, will be from the Legislative Ad Hoc Committee. Again, had those 4 purposes, which I'm happy to repeat upon request, but to keep things moving, I do want to recall that the commission, the full commission, approved a resolution in support of California Senate Bill 594, and that was transmitted with a cover letter to Sacramento at the end of April. At our last meeting, you'll recall that the IRC also authorized the ad hoc to work on language for proposed amendments to that bill. I want to note that I sent a message on May 23rd to members of the California State Redistricting Commission that provided a copy of the earlier resolution and cover letter, and also provided a brief summary of how we are thinking about those amendments and some related issues. That communication is available on the website. I'll now turn, I believe, to Commissioner Jack Russ.
Yes.
Who's going to present on behalf of the ad hoc, please.
Okay. Well, you kind of stole my thunder, Chair Bain.
Yet again, I'm very sorry.
Okay. That's okay. That's okay. No, but something I would add, though, that in accordance with the motion that was made and carried as item 6 on the May 13th commission that you referenced, we did, with the help of council, draft language for the chair to propose an amendment to the legislative author of SB 594 to extend the deadline for adoption to not earlier than January 15th and not later than January 31. One thing that we didn't do was that we deemed that the other 2 issues of item 6 of the item 6 motion with respect to the timing of the draft maps was shelved in order to provide really a simplified timeline request so that other stakeholders might be more likely to endorse it. And we got that as kind of feedback as we've met with stakeholders, new and we revisited with stakeholders as well. The other thing that we're in the midst of is contacting our local state legislators to inform them of the importance of 594. So that's, you stole most of my thunder, Chair Bain, so thank you.
You're welcome, I suppose. Thank you for that presentation. No, much appreciated.
Okay.
Before I turn to commissioners, let me ask David, are there any requests from the public to comment on this agenda item?
We did not receive any requests in advance of today's meeting, Chair Bain. If any member of the public would like to address the commission on this item, please raise your virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak. That concludes public comment on this item, Chair Bain.
Thank you very much. Any clarifying questions, comments, or requests from fellow commissioners? Very good. I do apologize and thank Commissioner Russ for his patience. I do thank the ad hoc committee as well as the entire commission for allowing the kind of flexibility that I think is needed for this project. By letting the ad hoc committee continue to explore with stakeholders the best way forward, by being responsive to public needs and having these kind of updates for the full commission and for the public, I think we're in a very good place to continue doing all we can to preserve as much time as possible for public comment, to cope with the delays that we faced, and to really have a good sense of how this is moving procedurally. I think that helps us shape our schedule and activities all the more efficiently. So my thanks to all of you for that. The final update on ad hoc business today will be from the Budget Ad Hoc Committee. Again, I'd be happy to offer a reminder of their mandate, but I think the more important thing for today is to note, as included in your agenda package for this meeting, that the Budget Ad Hoc Committee has submitted a final report to the Commission that wraps up its efforts. There's no vote needed on that report. It's an informational item, and I hope all of you had a chance to see it. It's well worth reading. I'll turn now to Co-Vice Chair Katerina for an update and any thoughts she wants to offer on behalf of the ad hoc, allowing, of course, the ad hoc, other members of the ad hoc to participate. But for now, Co-Vice Chair Katerina.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Chair. Well, we had a wonderful ad hoc committee. I want to thank Commissioners Diaz and Larson for all of their work and support and assistance, and also to staff and legal counsel for answering our many questions. I'm glad that the report is finished. And if anyone has any questions, of course, we're happy to address those questions at this time. But that's it for me.
Very good. Let me now turn to David to see if there were any requests from the public to speak on this agenda item.
We had no requests in advance of today's meeting. If any member of the public would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak, that concludes public comment on this item. Chair Bain.
Thank you very much. Any comments or questions from commissioners? Commissioner Serban. You're on mute, sir. Sorry.
Thank you. It's very embarrassing, but thank you for the reminder. Okay, so thank you to the staff for all the work and obvious hard work in this, and also especially to this committee for the exceptional and very thorough job that they've done. I wanted to ask, there was an email that we received that said that, and I'm just curious about the, in keeping with the oversight theme from earlier, we received an email that said that county council doesn't review or otherwise approve our IRC council's invoices. And I'm wondering how that process works then, and who does that?
Chair Bain, would you like me to address that concern?
Please, Barbara first. Yeah.
Thank you. So as you may recall, the invoices from legal were going to county council. They were receiving them. They would share them with the IRC staff. for the sort of the second approval, and then they would actually get processed by the county council. As a result of the discussions around the amendment and the contract, county council has no role in the review of the invoice itself. It's being sent directly to me. I work with Nicole on it. We cross-reference some, the hours, whatever is needed to do, just like with any other invoice. And then it's sent directly to the fiscal group for payment, which is outside of the IRC county staff. So the county council no longer is reviewing or approving those invoices. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Serban?
Yes, thank you. And I just want to note that I hold our council in very high regard. They've done very excellent work, and just wanted to understand just what the process is.
Yeah, and if I may add, the reason I wanted to clarify that information is we've requested that the information be updated on the memo and who it's sent to. It's no longer sent to county council, it's sent to me, but we needed to update the information on there. So we've requested that happens so that there's a clear trail.
Good. Thank you both for that. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Very well. Well, I hate to be repetitive, but I want to thank all members of the Budget Ad Hoc Committee. In particular, I want to offer appreciation and gratitude for the illumination that you've brought to so many of these issues. This is complex. It's complex because budgets are always complex, but it's complex in particular in this environment, in this role we find ourselves in. I really think you've addressed in an impressive way a key component of our work and put us on a good path to fulfilling our budget-related responsibilities, which of course do not end with this report. In fact, if anything, they're just going to grow. But I think on everything from point of contact to the kind of issue Commissioner Serban just brought up, we're in a very good place, and we all owe you a great deal of thanks for getting us there. Thank you. Moving on then, we'll go to agenda item 9, future agenda items. This is an informational item only, with no action specifically proposed for the commission at this meeting. But as I mentioned earlier, and I just want to reiterate, commissioner inputs on future agenda items, on things you want to address and see addressed, are always welcome. And the co-vice chairs and I, along with staff and council, will do all we can to address those concerns effectively and efficiently at an upcoming meeting. Before we hear from commissioners, I'll ask David if there are any requests from the public to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chair Boehm. We did not receive any requests in advance of the meeting. If any member of the public would like to address the commission on this item, please raise a virtual hand at this time. Not seeing any requests to speak, that concludes public comment on this item, Chair Boehm.
Very good, thanks. And in keeping with the Russ principle that I will try to steal thunder anytime I can, I am already noting that we need to once again look at the issue of the Voting Rights Act, both in terms of overall training, as well as some of the issues that have come up before. On that and other issues, I would respectfully request commissioners keep in mind the excellent point I think Commissioner Hanson made at a previous meeting, but others have as well. There are tremendous training resources and videos and themes to look at in the training continuum that ad hoc committee provided and is now posted. I really do strongly endorse and support the idea that the value we have in these meetings is to minimize actual presentations and focus on actual discussions. So anything that we can do on any future agenda item to read, to prepare, to come to the meeting ready to talk, I will strongly endorse and move on past the canned presentation among ourselves as quickly as possible. I also know we have translation on the agenda, as we've talked about before, but I think there are some good thoughts that came out today. We'll be talking about that. And I do think we're getting closer to the point where we're going to have to talk, maybe not in the next meeting, but soon, about the actual process coming up for public hearings, for public input and increased public input at our regular meetings, and more on that public engagement as we begin to ramp up. We need to do some more thinking about exactly and how that will best flow, but I will ask everyone to start thinking of that. With that in mind, I have Commissioner Krugliak and then Commissioner Serban. Commissioner Krugliak, please.
And Commissioner Hanson after Commissioner Serban. Mine is more a comment rather than a wish list. So for any of the speakers who are still on the call with us, I would just say that if you see the agenda and there's a topic that you had hoped to see that isn't there, I think your time would be best used if you are 5 people coming from the same organization and want to make a point to us that's not there. Please feel free to use those 15 minutes total to give us a presentation, to tell us the information that you wished had been on the agenda, because it would certainly get the information to us better than necessarily hearing the same concerns raised multiple times. So just consider that as an option to make sure that we get the information that you think we should be getting if it's not on an agenda item.
It's an excellent point. Thank you very much for that, Commissioner. And I will ask staff to do some thinking about that. We certainly have it within our purview to change the time limits for public input for individual speakers. And I think Commissioner Krugliak makes a very good point. We ought to consider whether that would be a better use of that block of time, with the understanding it might be several different groups submitting the same message. I know there are some legal and procedural requirements that need to be met in that, but we'll try to do some thinking and research on what might be possible within that. So thank you for that. Commissioner Serban?
I wonder if it might, and thank you. I wonder if it might be time to discuss further the budget ad hoc committee's recommendations. I mean, they issued a report, there were recommendations. I think we should probably talk about them and see if we want to do anything about them. Or, I mean, I don't want that report to just die. There was a lot of work there, and we should, I want to have a full discussion about what we think about it and what we ought to do about it. I mean, this meeting, we've mentioned a few times the importance of our role as an oversight committee, and you know, overseeing public expenditures is probably a thing we ought to do. So we should probably talk about that at some point. Also, I think there was a public comment about Ms. Ericat's presentation mentioned a mapping tool, and I wonder if we can get that mapping tool stood up and available. I don't think we need a demographer for that. I wonder how, it sounds like it's an IT thing, a county IT thing maybe. And I'd also like to explore the translation of that tool, whether it's possible to translate that into the various languages that we'd be interested in translating into.
Yeah, thank you for that. Let me just provide a little context in my mind on how the budget and oversight questions will arise. I was keenly aware that we were going to be talking about point of contact today. I think that discussion was good. I, for one, would say that discussion was informed well by both the Budget Ad Hoc Committee's report as well as its previous work. I wanted to see how that was headed, and I'm glad we had the discussion today. But Commissioner, I think you make a very good point. Whether it's at our next meeting or the meeting after that, we'll see how the point of contact addresses some of those related issues, but there are unquestionably going to be other issues that need to be addressed within that. To that end, I'll just mention now, we are also, at the co-vice chairs and I, thinking a little bit about bylaws and how we need to make a systemic approach to them, including on these kind of questions. I just want to preview that we'll, rather than task or create another ad hoc at this point, I'm asking the co-vice chairs to work with me on a careful review that we'll be providing to the commission in the not too distant future to look at a lot of these kind of issues, not just an oversight, but some of the things on social media we're talking about, as well as some of the other things to make sure we're in the right place. I know we've talked about that before, but we will again. On the mapping tool, I'll ask the demographer RFP ad hoc to keep that in mind and feel free to offer thoughts. I'll also ask commissioners and members of the public as well. This as Commissioner Garcia said, or Co-Vice Chair Garcia said, this is an ongoing process, and there is an email available where members of the public can send thoughts in that we can incorporate into our thinking as we go. Commissioners are, of course, allowed and frankly encouraged to contact staff. I think many of you have been taking advantage of that, and council, to explore some of these issues more. And I'm perfectly happy to address all those issues, including Commissioner Serban, what you were just saying about the mapping tool and its translation. It's just a matter of finding the right moment. So I agree it's coming. I want to see, from my perspective, where we are on the demographer contractor in the coming meeting, not so much because it has to wait for them, but just to frame it up. But I certainly think we can have that included as an agenda item in the not too distant future. Co-Vice Chair Garcia, then, oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Hanson, you had your hand up, then Co-Vice Chair Garcia, please. Commissioner Hanson.
I would like to recommend that we, at the end of our meeting minutes, it lists all of, or the minutes of the meeting, it lists all the topics that were brought up for possible discussion. On our next agenda, could we after the minutes are read, like item 4, could item 5 be readdress the list of things that were brought up last time, and in a word or a phrase, just report back what has happened. Like the ad hoc committee met, or refer to the demographer, or refer to, so that people understand and see that. I had the same experience as the caller, because when I read the minutes when I read the agenda for this meeting, I did not find those topics. There's no reference to those topics. And so I think that could be a way of addressing that problem for other people, that we at least just say, yes, we heard you, and that this is what we've done so far. And it may be that the answer is no, we're not going to do that, but at least you have given recognition for the idea. And my other idea was, or my other hope was, that we could discuss at the next meeting, or at least the one after that, when and how we are going to move to in-person meetings for ourselves.
Both good points. We can certainly have an update on in-person at our next meeting, and I'll ask staff. I think they were already thinking of that with relation to other meetings going on, as well as June 15th approaches. It's one of those bellwether moments. On the other idea, that's a really interesting idea, particularly in terms of increased accessibility for the public. I'll beg your indulgence, and I promise, even if we don't have a full list, we will come back to that and provide an update at the next meeting on what research we turn up and what's within the realm, both of the possible and the advantageous. So thank you for that. Co-Vice Chair Garcia.
Just really quickly, and you stole my thunder. I was going to mention bylaws, but yes, because there are a number of issues that I think can be addressed in the bylaws, and I'm looking at the future agenda items from our last meeting that included clarification of ex parte communication rules, and that would be addressed in the bylaws. But I guess it was Commissioner Serban who was asking about the Draw My California tool that's available at the statewide website. And I had brought that up at the last meeting, along with the COI tool, the Communities of Interest tool that's available at Common Cause. I'd like to make sure that we don't lose track of that. I know that the Draw My California tool might be problematic for us, and I think Commissioner Emmett can speak a little bit more to that, but apparently using that tool, which is a good tool, sends the information to the CCRC, to the statewide commission, and you have to do something special to actually take that information and get it to us. So I don't know. Again, I just want to make sure that we don't lose track of that. If that is a tool that we can somehow adapt to use for our purposes, that would be great. But apparently it's currently not all that. It's not automatically useful to us, is the way I understand it.
Thank you for that. And I'm sure we can have some further research and take on that. Any other comments, suggestions, areas of interest that haven't been mentioned? All right. We'll move on to adjournment in just a moment, but I really do want to thank all commissioners for their time and energy tonight. Frankly, looking at the clock, this is one of the reasons I'm careful about what we put on the agenda for any given meeting, because I like the flexibility to have these robust discussions. That said, I'm the first to say, even if I'm stealing thunder, it's really appreciated that everyone's making the time to stay engaged and to talk with each other, not just at each other. I can't thank you enough for allowing me to be part of the group. And again, I want to thank all members of the public who joined us tonight for, I think, a really good discussion and a really good focus on some of the themes we'll need to be addressing. So that concludes our business before the commission for this evening's meeting. The next meeting of the Independent Redistricting Commission will be Thursday, June 10th at 2 p.m. with the understanding that expressions of interest and statements of interest on the point of contact role, if you're so interested, are due Wednesday, June 2nd by 5 p.m. to staff. With that, the meeting is adjourned at 8:19 p.m. Have a great evening and a very, very good Memorial Day to all. Thank you.